Good evening, everyone, and welcome to
Good
our
evening.
new remote meetup. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting a meetup with Woody Zuill, the godfather of mob programming. Hello, Woody. So, Woody will be expanding our minds by explaining how mob programming can really help us collaborate better and how this is useful to all kinds of professions and professionals, not only programmers and software developers. We also have Alberto Brandolini. Hello, Zio.
Hello.
Inventor of event storming and founder of Avanscoperta, who is joining us for some live visual scribing of Woody's talk. I will be sharing the link in a second so you understand what I'm talking about. So let me just remind you, you can also ask questions to Woody and Alberto by using the live chat that we have here on YouTube. Every now and then, we'll be stopping to read the questions, so feel free to ask whatever you feel you need to ask. And that is it for now. Over to Woody now. Thanks.
All right. Well, so let's make sure that thing's working well. And if you can hear me fine, that's wonderful. I think I need to share my screen now, right?
Yes.
Okay, give me a second to do that.
Yeah.
There we go. And I got to figure out which screen. I think it's this one. And let's see if that works.
It does.
All right. Is that good? All righty. So what I've titled this talk is The Power of Mob Programming. And to me, mob programming was just a simple, maybe evolution of pair programming. And when we originally started doing it, we found that it was very effective for us. But as people started asking us, how do we, what's this about? How does it work? They wanted to know whether it was worth doing and how can you prove that it works and things like that. So I realized I need to start figuring out a way to explain this stuff. So what we're going to share with you today, I'm going to share with you a few ideas about why I think mob programming is helpful. I'll give you a little bit of an introduction. If you're not familiar with mob programming, then there are other talks where you can get more details. But I think we're going to be doing a workshop on that coming up in the next few months. So, but let's see where we can go with this. Essentially, for me at least, mob programming started out as just a way of working. And I have to be really careful about this. I'm not here to tell you what you should do or how to do something or whether or not you should do it. I'm just going to share with you some ideas about what we did and why we continued doing it and what we did, why, how, and the purpose. So this started for us at a place called Hunter Industries. I always share this because it's important to me that we honor the people that gave us the opportunities. And when I went to work there, they'd asked me to help a team who was where they were struggling with their work, and they wanted me to help them become better at doing their work. And in actuality, my belief is that the reason we don't do well in our work is usually that we're being managed in a manner that makes it difficult for us to do our work. And so this is a group that gave me the opportunity to let the team figure out how they could best work. So a quick definition for mob programming is it's all the brilliant minds working together on the same thing at the same time and in the same space. We add to it that we're at the same computer. We're all sitting around the same computer. It could look like this, basically. This is showing here a group of people with all kinds of different skills and knowledge, but they're working on the same thing at the same time. By bringing all the different skills and knowledge, we eliminate some problems. And some of those problems are really focused on communication, and they're focused on feedback. And some of those problems are based on the queuing time or the waiting we have to wait to make those communications. Let's see how this unfolds. Here's a team working doing mob programming. This was taken in 2013. And in this picture, there is a tester, 3 developers or 4 developers, a product owner, and a database expert. We brought together all the people with the knowledge and skills to do the work we were doing. We're working on some story or feature, and everybody's there to contribute in real time as we do the work. And that's what I really think of as the power of mob programming. Here's what it looks like from the back. In this case, there were 5 of us working this day, the 5 of us sitting there, plus the person taking the picture. The point is that we're all focused on the same thing at the same time. I'm going to show you a batch of pictures in a second, where you can see different teams working together. I want you to notice how completely people are paying attention or are engaged in their work. This is one of the things we found with mob programming, is that we get the benefit of staying engaged in our work. And I think there's several reasons for that. One of them is that everything's taking us a lot less time to do because we're all working on it together. So things are moving by quickly. Plus, we're working on interesting things. And as long as they're interesting, we stay engaged and we stay focused on it. Here's a group doing it remotely. It can be done remotely, as a lot of you know now. There's a lot of remote mob programming going on. But it's not 5 people watching one person coding. It's everybody working together. And we use a mechanism. You have to have some kind of mechanisms to do this, where there's one person at the keyboard, and we call them the driver, and everyone else is a navigator. They're the ones who are doing the real programming. We're programming as a team. The rest of us are talking about what we're doing and what we should do next. And the person at the keyboard is putting that into the computer. So it's a very interactive or dynamic thing. It's not us just watching as somebody types. It goes rather quickly. We use this idea I got from Zuill and Falco. For an idea to go from someone's head into the computer, it must go through someone else's hands. This was a fundamental thing that worked extremely well for us. And you're going to learn more about that as we go. But this seems preposterous or crazy. A lot of people will say initially to me when they first hear about it is, how can that possibly work? Having 5 people sitting at one computer, we're just going to be sitting around wasting time. But what we found is the opposite. It works extremely well. We get a lot more done. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about that. But this seems confusing to people that how could it possibly work? But I'm going to show you a series of pictures here that show you this being done all over the world. This happens to be our original location at Hunter Industries. They grew now, I think, to 7 or 8 teams, or maybe even 9 teams. Here's a group in Alaska, a group in the UK. Watch how people are staying focused on the work they're doing. Another group in London, a group in Boston. Everybody's engaged in the work, but there are very many different working environments. Here's a group in Stockholm, a group in London, another group in London. This is Harvard, a class being taught using mob programming. There's a company in San Diego with many teams. I think they have more than 10 teams now working mob programming. Now, remember, we're in this time where we're all working remotely. So most of these teams that you're seeing are actually working remotely, but mob programming works very well remotely. Here's a group in South Africa. Now, this picture here, if we're coordinated here in the pictures, this is Grace Hopper. This was way before we even talked about mob programming. But when I saw this picture, I immediately identified it as being the same thing as mob programming. All the brilliant minds are gathered together to do the work together. Now, it would have probably been a good thing for them to have a large monitor, but in those days, I don't think they had any monitors. So their programming was always printed out on a teletype or something. Another group in that's in Göteborg, Sweden. A group in Germany, I think that's at a user group. This is another user group. This is where some of the ideas we use in mob programming originated in Paris, France. This is the software craftsmanship community in Paris, France. I'm not sure if they still call themselves that. There's another group in France actually working, a group in Japan working, I think. That might have been at a conference. This is a group in Japan working as well. Anyways, you get the idea. Oh, this is one of my favorite groupings of pictures. These are some folks at a place in Stockholm, Sweden. And I love to look at these pictures here. There's a lot of whiteboards, and visual communications is really important. We talk, we discuss things, but when we get it visual, get it up on the board, and then get it into code, I think that's a powerful thing. And because things change quickly when we're working this way, everything's rather dynamic. We're using whiteboards with sticky notes. That's how we do our work and how we communicate. Here are a few more groups doing it remotely. Corgi Bytes, This is Cucumber.io, and this is Zapier. I think that's how you say it, Zapier. These different companies, all organizations, do their work remotely using mob programming. One last picture. This is the NASA Mission Control. I think that this is really kind of the idea that they've gathered together all the people that they need to do this work. So all the skills and knowledge are either in this room or in some room that's directly connected, maybe somewhere else in the world, or somebody that's in a spaceship. But they're all working together at the same time. We've gathered together all the skills and knowledge that we need. So this might be a good time for a little bit of a answering a question or two now that you've been introduced to it. Let's see if there are any questions yet that I might be able to.
Thanks, Woody, for the introduction. So the first one would be from Manuel Mesacano, who says, what would be the best way to introduce mob programming in the workplace or to your manager? And also he says, keep doing what you're doing, it's great.
Thank you. So I don't think I could presume to say what's the best way, but I would say that merely having the conversation, like, hey, I saw this little video online. You want to take a look? It's about a highly collaborative way to work. I knew one person who introduced a team to mob programming by showing that little 3-minute time-lapse video that we have on YouTube that just showed our team working for a whole day. They showed it to this team and said, hey, take a look at this, what some crazy people in California are doing. They showed the video and then they said, hey, you want to try it? And then they tried it. So that's an easy introduction. I would never force anyone to do this or never require anyone to do this. I think it's best if it's always voluntary. Now, introducing it to your manager, it should be as easy as that. Most managers understand the value of collaboration. And if they don't, well, maybe it's time to start introducing them to that idea. Because how do we get stuff done if we're not collaborating? Most companies are built on the concept, if we bring the right people together, we can accomplish more than if we work alone. But once we bring them together, we're often not really working together. We're just sitting nearby in separate cubicles. Well, I hope that helped answer that question.
Thanks, Woody. Then we have another one from Marco Heimsoft. Hi, Marco. Asking how and why do you switch from mob programming to pair programming and back?
So this is an important concept. The team will figure that out. In other words, when they're going, oh, we're kind of stuck here and we're working as pairs and we come together and work as a group, that's the team will know that feeling when we really need to get all the brains on this. And when we're all working together, we might say, let's split apart for a while. If your company is already, or your organization is already doing pair programming, it's an easy step to start collaborating in a bigger way. So the decision, once a team gets a little skill at mob programming, their decision as to when it's appropriate to work is the time for them. Now, overall, with us at Hunter, we always worked as a team. Now, a team member could decide to go off and be alone, split off with a pair and go do something, but almost all the time we were working together. And I've seen this at many companies. It's very dynamic. If you feel that this is something I can go take care of alone, well, then you just go do that. Or is this something we should pair on? Then we split up and do it in pairs. So it's going to be up to the team, and the team will quickly. I have a lot of confidence that once a team learns how to work well as a team, they can decide when to split apart and when to come back together. I hope that answered the question. Was that the question you had asked? Is that an answer that seems reasonable?
Well, let's see what Marco says. Manuel thanks you for the previous one. We will read another one, and then we'll go on with the talk. And
Excellent.
after that, we will read the other one. So I'll read Sankiv's question. I hope I did say that right. And he says, what could QA engineers do while developers are coding?
Well, this is an important part of working as a team. I want to have all the different perspectives of the people who are going to work on this software working together. So if the QA person is always working separate, we're not getting the benefit of their point of view. If we call the QA a tester or somebody who's developing tests or actually doing tests. So I want that with the team because essentially, we're going to cover this in a bit. We're going to work through things very directly from start to finish. And when the team's done with them, we want to put them into production. We don't want to put them into some QA phase where they have to, we would then get reports back of what to fix. So the QA person or the tester is actually working with the team. They're contributing their ideas as we go. I think this is going to be difficult to test. Let's find a way to make it easier to test. Or they might say, this thing that you're doing right now is going to break this other thing in another part of the application. So we want those communications happening in real time as we do the work. Now, when we get to the test near the very end of before we deploy something, let's say we worked on something for 3 hours. Well, at that time, the tester or the QA expert is going to not be at the keyboard. They'll guide the other people in doing the testing. And as we find problems, we'll fix them immediately. We want that rapid feedback. So the QA, the testers, the database expert, the product owner, all of them can be working together with everybody at the same time. It won't always work out that way, but that would be my hope. I believe the QA or testers are a first-class, full member of the team. They're part of the development team. They're not separate from getting this work done.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Woody. I would say let's carry on with the presentation, and there will be time for more later.
All righty. Excellent. So I often ask in my workshops, why would we work this way? And I ask people to contribute either on Post-it notes or whatever. What are their thoughts? Why would we work this way? And we also, when we first started working this way, discovered these things ourselves. I'm going to share with you a few of the ideas of what we hear. And this is a big part of the power of mob programming. We get knowledge sharing. There's a lot more knowledge sharing going on than we would typically do with a team that is not mob programming. There's going to be a continuous code and design reviews. We're paying attention to what's happening. And at any time we might say, oh, we've got to do this in a different way. The user won't be comfortable with this. Or this is confusing to use. So the design review is happening at the same time as the code review. And because we have everybody involved, hopefully, we will come up with better solutions because of this. We're getting all these perspectives on the work at the same time. This is something that often just happens in meetings afterwards, or a review of, well, how is this app working now after it's been delivered to the customer or just before. We're doing it, we're getting the benefit of all these perspectives as we do the work. And this gives us a very rapid feedback so we can act on it immediately instead of having a long drawn out process. So this helped us focus on the right things. What it means to focus on the right things is often we do stuff because we've decided to do it beforehand. But once we start doing it, we start questioning, is this really useful to do? And now in real time, we're questioning that. And it gets us more focused on what's the right thing to do right now, instead of what are the things that we thought before would have been the right thing. We were ending up with much higher quality. We were ending up with better solutions, both from the user's point of view and from the customer's point of view. So the customer is the one who is arranging to have this software provided for their users in their company. And we want to fulfill both those desires. The users themselves should be happy. The customer should be happy. The people who have to install it should be happy, and so on. The people who have to maintain it. We were eliminating queues and reducing inventory. These both have to do with flow. These enhance the flow of the work. Eliminating queues means there's much less waiting time. We're not waiting to get answers to questions that are blocking us. Inventory means essentially what we're working on. And when we have a lot of queuing or waiting time, we build up the inventory, which is not good. Inventory is stuff we haven't yet delivered to the customer. And the more of that we have, the bigger the problem we have. We found this was more fun and less stressful and more engaging. Why would we work this way? Well, all of these benefits. But I want to answer that in a slightly different way. Why would we work this way? Because the team decided to work this way. This is a very important aspect. If the team is not allowed to decide how they're going to work, and they're just following the directions of someone else telling them who they'll work with, what they'll work on, when it needs to be done, what their workstations will be like, what tools they'll use, all those decisions are made by someone else. That's a very much less effective way of getting our work done. Let the team figure it out. How can we best get this work done? So I want to just cover a little bit more about the concept and then some things about collaboration. The concept is this: we're going to optimize for the flow of the work rather than the output of the individual. What happens when we focus on the output of the individual is that we get a de-optimization of the flow of the work. When we want to highly load each person so they have plenty to do, we're destroying our ability to let the work flow through our process. And this is very much a lean concept, and it's very much broken in most software development. We have to remember, it's not about speed. It's not about working as quickly as possible. It's about letting the work flow as smoothly as possible. This is very different. So, many people believe if we separate the workers, they'll be able to get more work done, but it destroys the flow. We need to understand that. So this is not about getting the most out of each person. This is about getting the best from each person into everything we do. There's a very powerful advantage when we can get the best of each person. Let's figure out how to make that easy to do. And mob programming, we found, helps us do this. Now, we discovered mob programming, so to speak. We didn't set out to do this. It emerged from our efforts of attempting to become good at collaboration. We understood that collaboration was important, and we started studying how can we make it easier to collaborate. And I want to talk quite a bit more about collaboration as we go. As a matter of fact, I'm more and more believing that this focus on collaboration is a very powerful thing for us. So software development is rarely done as a solo activity. It's almost always a collaborative effort. To make my point, if you are the user of your software and you are writing it and you know what you want, then that is essentially a one-person project. But if somebody else is going to use your software, you almost automatically are going to be doing a collaborative effort. This is sort of an important thing to consider. This is actually a very important thing to consider, that we are collaborating in our work regardless of if we're doing mob programming or not. This collaboration that we're doing is allowing us to take care of all the different aspects of the work that we're going to do. We have a database expert. We have a product expert. We have a tester. We have so on and so on. So you get the idea, I hope, that it's a collaborative effort whenever there's more than one person involved. Software development almost always has more than one person involved, regardless of how we break it up. If I'm going to write some front-end thing and somebody else is doing the database work and somebody's writing something that's going to provide that to my front end, we are collaborating, but maybe in a very ineffective manner if we're sitting separately from each other. So essentially, what is collaboration? And I've kind of just put it this way. Collaboration is working together. Now, it can be done very effectively and it can be done very ineffectively. If we separate the team members and they work separately on stuff, and then we get together in meetings to discuss what we did, that to me is a very ineffective way of collaborating. I want to share with you an idea called Wheel's Law, and then maybe we'll take some more questions. Wheel's Law is from a professor in Finland who wrote his fundamental law essentially is this, that communication usually fails except by accident. Now, I'm going to go through this rather quickly because I don't want to focus too much on this, but I believe there's a reason we should understand Wheel's laws and that we need to do something about it. I'm going to give you 5 or 6 of his laws real quickly. If communication can fail, it will. If communication cannot fail, it still most usually fails. If communication seems to succeed in the intended way, there's been a misunderstanding. If you're content with your message, communication has certainly failed. In other words, we are almost always tricking ourselves when we think communication has succeeded. If a message can be interpreted in several ways, it'll be interpreted in the manner that maximizes the damage. That's what Twitter is. There's always someone who knows better than you what you meant by your message. And that definitely is what Twitter is, those last 2. The more we communicate, the worse the communication succeeds. That's because there's more and more stuff to misunderstand and miscommunicate. The more we communicate, the faster the misunderstandings propagate. So what are we going to do about this? This is the Wheel's laws. And I believe mob programming gives us an opportunity to address this problem by working together. Let's take another Q&A. I think that might have popped up a few questions. Or
Yeah,
not. Oh,
just a second. So we had one outstanding from Stefan before, and it was any recommendations for who to do, well, for who should do basically boring tasks as a mob, as well as recommendations for doing exploratory tasks such as spread out and come back together and the likes.
absolutely. So at any time, the team can do the second. You can say, hey, let's all sit separately, do some quick research, bring back what we found. Because sometimes that works great. We might need to separate for an hour to do that. Usually, we can be doing that concurrently with the team. We can be sitting right there with the team, notice there's something that looks like it's going to be a problem, and start Googling it on our own machine. If Googling is a legitimate word to use nowadays, you can be constantly, there should be other computers around. It's not just the one we're working through. All of our work goes through one computer, but we can have our phones and our other computers nearby that help us do our thinking by research. However, let's see, the first part of that, could you repeat that first part of that question?
Yeah, the first part you said.
Yeah, what was the first?
So any recommendations for who should do the boring tasks as a mob?
So this is a trick we play on ourselves. As soon as a team recognizes we have some boring work, we should be asking, why are we doing boring work? Software development should never be boring work. And if we have that kind of work, we should figure out why and make it so we don't have that kind of work anymore. So if we're talking about drudgery work, where somebody has to go through and correct a bunch of data that got corrupted or something like that, then we should be figuring out, why did we have that problem in the first place, and what can we do to not have that problem again? If we find our team has, let's say, more than 10% boring work, I'm just picking that number out of my head, we should be addressing, why are we doing boring work? That's not software development. And if we're doing this so-called boring work, we really need to figure out, why have we allowed ourselves to take on that kind of thing? Nobody should be doing boring work. We should be focusing on increasing our capabilities and getting rid of, and part of that is getting rid of the need for that boring work. If we can't automate it, we probably aren't the developers we should be, or the developers we think we are. We should be able to automate any boring work. I hope that's not too derogatory, but yeah.
That's really cool and inspiring as well. So I'll read a couple of other questions. This one is from Daniel. Have you seen mobs work with non-developers as core members, for example, UI designers, managers, or does this lead to two-class mobs as they can't contribute through code?
So programming implies.
Was that clear?
Oh, pardon me?
Was it clear?
Yeah, it was a little.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but yeah, I think I get it. So programming itself, I want to call it development. So we called it mob programming. The development is going to result in us creating some code, but that needs skills from people who are not coders. So essentially, I first experienced something of this sort back in 2005 or 6, where we had a team of 6 people, and we split into 2 groups. Each group had a product expert, which we now think of as a product owner, a developer, and a tester. And we worked as a team of 3 to get through our work. The tester and the developer were more familiar with the code. The product owner, was really a business analyst, was more interested in what should this code do. And the tester was most familiar with what do we already have, because the developer's always focused on the very narrow thing of getting this current thing working. So bringing those 3 together to develop together, there's still just one person coding in that case. With mob programming, we often have it where anybody can take the keyboard at any time, but the keyboard isn't where all of our work is done. The work is done in the brain and in our conversations and communication. So I want non-coders on the team. This is part of it. We're trying to create a larger brain than any one of us can have alone. That way we don't have to keep we're sharing the mental load. We don't have to keep everything in one brain. We don't have to constantly go off of our team to go get answers to questions that are blocking us. This is an important thing. This is how we get flow. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Excellent. Thanks, Woody. So we have two more. Anton asks, when using mob programming, how can we make sure no one is idle? I think I'm saying it the right way. IDLE.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
any techniques for that?
Okay, let's start with that one. First of all, because we've gathered together all the skills and knowledge that we need, there's not really going to be somebody who's idle. The work that we do, instead of taking 2 weeks to get something done, is now taking us 2 or 3 hours to get something done. So it's not like we're just sitting there wondering what's going to happen next. It's going very quickly. So there's nobody, what I would consider idle. But it's important to understand this. Remember the slides I talked about? We're not trying to get the most work out of each person. We're trying to get the best of each person. And that means as we work together and we stay engaged in the work and we ask each other questions and work through the problems, there is nobody really idle. If we feel that we're really idle and we're never contributing on this team, let's say over a week's period of time, it seems like we never have anything useful to contribute, then we probably don't need to be on this team. They've already got it covered without us. On the other hand, if the team is constantly blocked by questions that they can't answer themselves, that gives us an indication that there is somebody that we need to bring onto this team that has those skills and knowledge, or the team has to get them themselves. But we're going to do that quickly either way. So if we find there are people that are idle, we probably have a team that has some people that aren't needed to be there. You know, they could be off working on another team, working on some other effort. Another question.
I think we lost you.
You lost who? Am I not here? Is it frozen?
No, actually, I was listening to you.
Alberto,
so
can you hear Woody?
Yes, I can. I could hear him all the time, so I guess it's good.
Okay. I think I'm not hearing you anymore. Can you hear me in the chat? Sorry for this. It's,
I'll put a chat.
The beauty of being
no
live.
Problem. No problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apologies. I'm hearing you. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, folks. Technical difficulties.
Yeah. Okay. Please carry on. I might have some issues, but if everyone is hearing us, it's great. Well, then there you go.
We'll find out. So you're following it in YouTube, and is it operating in YouTube? All right. I'll continue on, going past the Q&A. How's that? Well, I'm going to act as if everything's working. In most cases, collaboration is difficult. This is hard for us to do. We've spent most of our career working as solo workers. We're individuals and we like working alone. And if we didn't originally like working alone, we started getting so good at controlling our day by working alone that we've lost our skills of collaboration. So collaboration is difficult for other reasons, but as well. But let's go on with this. Essentially, collaboration is about not being a hero. When we want to work as heroes, we get this culture where we depend on the heroes and we allow too many emergencies to occur. And it's important for me, and I think it's important for our industry to realize that heroes is one of the least collaborative ways of working. So what are we going to do about this? Well, we just talked about the WIO's laws, and I think that we benefit from making it easy to do collaboration. How are we going to do that? Now, we started out first by just talking about it, way before mob programming started. And we started gathering together more frequently to have retrospectives. And we even started doing a daily retrospective. We would be reflecting on what happened today and how can we take advantage of that tomorrow? How can we turn up the good on what went well today? One of the things that I've believed in and worked with for a long time is that it's in the doing of the work that we discover the work that we must do. And this is because doing exposes reality. So the thing is, Wheel's law kind of tells me this is an important maxim. That Wheel's law is saying because communication doesn't work so well, we need another mechanism to make sure we're communicating. And I believe that it is in doing the work. As soon as you do something, let's say the product owner says, well, I want a drop down that has the regions in it so we could populate another drop down with the cities. So we start coding that, and pretty soon the product owner says, well, no, it's not actually the cities. I want the regions and then the districts. So to understand that we misspoke or that it was misunderstood, because who knows which side that was on, this shows it to us really quickly. We don't get this quick feedback if we are writing requirements documents and handing them off and so on. Mob programming is about a one-piece flow. We're going to work on one thing at a time, beginning to end, focusing on it and making sure we make the communications. I want to talk a little bit about collaboration and Agile. Agile software development, when it originated, it was coming out of a history of a software development world where most work was done in a very, what they now call waterfall model, although that term first came around probably in the 70s and maybe before with Winston Royce's original paper that discusses this. The issue with the waterfall or with a phased approach is that a lot of communications don't happen in real time. And I think the people who wrote the Agile Manifesto understood this. So the first value they listed was that we value interactions and individuals, or I could think they have the opposite way, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. What was important is making it easy to have those interactions. I think all of the Agile Manifesto and the principles that go along with it are closely related to collaboration. So I think they understood this, and when they introduced Agile, they were saying, let's find ways to work more directly together. Let's have the business people and the product owner, which we might think of nowadays as product owner, and the developers working together closely daily. Let's collaborate with our customers. Let the team figure out how to do things. A self-organizing, self-managing team. These are all in the Agile Manifesto. So this is bringing me to the concept of flow. In a lot of organizations, we believe that if we work separately and then gather that work together, that's an effective way to work. But I believe what happens when we do this is we get a lot of what I would consider waste from a lean point of view. One of those wastes is the queuing. If one person has a question for someone else and they can't ask it directly because they only talk during meetings, then they have a queue. They've gotten into a queue. But even if they're allowed to go over to somebody's cubicle, which nowadays is not uncommon, or send them a message, we're going to be taking them out of their context, trying to bring them into our context, trying to get them into understanding what our problem is, then having them concentrate on it for a while, and then go back to their context. So that means we've disrupted somebody. We want to work without the disruptions, without the interruptions. And yet it's necessary to be disrupted if the people need to communicate with each other. So when we break people apart, we increase the cost of communication and we increase the need to coordinate things. Matter of fact, if somebody was coming over and interrupting me all the time, I couldn't get my own work done. And that usually leads to somebody eventually saying, look, I know you got a lot of questions. How about if we meet at 2 o'clock this afternoon to have our discussion? We've just put somebody into a queue. And then what do they work on when they're waiting for us? They're going to work on something else. That it means we've increased the inventory. So I want to talk about flow just a little bit in manufacturing. This is a very simplified point of view, but it's the complete production of a piece from start to finish without inventory or as little inventory as possible. That's work in process. And as little queuing or waiting between operations. Ideally, we would perfect this where as a piece is going down the assembly line, the things that are being assembled are being manufactured at the very moment they're needed. That almost never happens. Perfection or ideal situation really never happens, but we want to get close to it. The question is, can we get some kind of flow like this for software development? And this is how I define flow in software development. Each story flows from an idea to delivered working software. That means somebody's using it as directly as possible, without the queuing, without the inventory, without the distractions we just talked about, without the interruptions and without the multitasking. This is optimizing for the flow rather than optimizing for the output of the individual. We don't realize how costly it becomes when we optimize for the output of the individual. We no longer are interested in who's getting a lot of work done. We're interested in how well is this work flowing through our process. We get better results. And we actually found we got a lot more done when we stopped focusing on getting more done. It's a weird little paradox perhaps. So we found that when we achieved flow, we were getting the right work done. I talked about that earlier. We were more focused on discovering the right thing to work on. And this includes the exploration, experimenting, and discovery necessary to discover that. Those things seem wasteful in a lot of environments. I would say they are not wasteful. But we were doing less of the wrong things and they faded away. We didn't solve the problem of the waiting and so on purposefully. They just stopped being problems. The queuing and the waiting, the inventory, the merging, the arguing and the discussions, the work that doesn't need to get done, the doing of the wrong thing, all of these things faded away. The last three things there, meetings, coordination, prioritizing, that's the area that managers love to work. And yet we found we needed almost no meetings, coordination, and prioritizing. Things just revealed themselves as we went. And I think that we probably have covered enough for today. This is the power of mob programming. I think that we accidentally stumbled on it, but it gave us a way to be highly collaborative and achieve flow. And those things together are very powerful. And if I was starting over again in my career, I think I would have moved from solo to pair much quicker. It took me about 15 years to go from when I first started programming until I even heard about pair programming. 1998 is I think when I first heard about it. I started practicing with it. I became good enough at it over 3 or 4 years that it became my preferred way to work. And then it took me another 5 years of experimenting to see, well, can we do this with more people? And then we had the opportunity, as I described earlier in 2011, to work as a full team all the time. This was very powerful and very useful. I would change my career if I could go back and do it. Take advantage of collaboration. Take advantage of flow. It's really worthwhile. I think we have time for more questions and answers. I'm not sure, but I'd be happy to do that. I hope that was useful to everyone.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm taking over for the question. I have one from Lucia. How can mob programming improve communication by using code as a way to communicate? Actually, it's not a single question. It's so many question marks. So by using code as a way to communicate, what about communication to other people, such as stakeholders or client or, yeah.
So we're really talking about with mob programming, one part of this bigger space, because if we can essentially smooth over the communications that are happening between the team members, we get one advantage. If we can smooth over this communication across into the product owners, which I consider a full class member of the team, so they should be part of the team and should be working with the team daily, if not all day long. I would prefer all day long. So we are expanding on that. Now, communicating with the stakeholders, people outside of the team who are just interested in the work getting done or communicating with the users, those communications happen in other ways as well. There's no reason that those people couldn't be part of the team. We often would bring actual users onto our team so we could do certain parts of the work. But I would argue that by delivering frequently, we get the rapid feedback. So if a user has something that they would like us to create for them, we figure it out and do it, that's a collaboration. And then they get to use it, that's a collaboration. So there are I think making things transparent is what we're talking about here. If we have executives or managers in the company and they are not effectively being communicated with, we need to figure that out as well. Why aren't they, and what can we do about it? So these are mob programming solves for certain, I should say, addresses a certain area can't address everything.
Awesome. Second question is from Christoph. How many hours of mob programming do you do in a day? What is your experience with fatigue compared to pairing solo work?
So in our original team, we pretty much worked, every one of us, all day long with the team. However, there were a few team members that really felt a need to be alone sometime, because they sort of became, they're introverts to the degree that they became overwhelmed by too much interaction. So they needed to have time alone, and that we wanted to honor. And so they were allowed to leave at any time and go work alone. But the team will figure this out. If a team can work an 8-hour day and stay relaxed and stay sustainable and stay engaged and enjoying themselves, then there's no reason they can't do that. If we feel that we need to work alone or in pairs at any time, the team figures that out. The better we become at collaborating and working together, the better off we are. I would argue that we've ignored getting the skills we need. I have a whole talk I can do about the skills needed to become good at this. But we need to practice. We need to spend time gaining those skills. It's not something we're automatically able to do. It'd be like if I came to the three of you here that are putting this on today, Enrico and Alberto, and I said, hey, let's have a rock and roll band. And you go, yeah, I would love that. And I'd say, does anybody here play guitar? You go, well, no, not really. Anybody play drums? Well, no, I don't. So there we go. So we'd have to see what skills we have. Then we'd have to practice a lot before we started getting some gigs. And this is the same process. We say, hey, let's work together. What skills do we already have? Can we do this? What skills do we need to get? How are we going to get them? That's for the team to figure out.
And
I think I got off the question, though.
Yeah, but I guess that the answer in many cases is just like, we don't need so much structure, and just like we need to get control of what we're doing. Started as an experiment, we can switch it off if it doesn't work, we can adapt it if it works better, and then is localized knowledge is on the spot. Like a big, large room could be better than a small and dark one, and then has nothing to do with the technique. It might be related to the context we are in. And
yeah, so actually, if we are reflecting frequently as to what's going well and turning that up, a lot of the problems fade away. So for example, for us, we were moving from room to room because the only rooms that were available to us originally were meeting rooms where we could get together separate from other people, not annoying them, and all be in the same space looking at one big computer screen. And then after a few weeks of doing that, we all realized to turn up the good on working together, we need to find a room that we don't need to move out of when we're done. For example, you want to have a whiteboard that stays your whiteboard every day. So as you come in, it's still got your stuff on it. You don't want to have to carry your stuff around from room to room. So you look at what's going well and you turn up the good on what's going well. And sometimes you might need to address a problem, but I always like to focus or convert a problem into a turn up the good opportunity. What can we turn up the good on that will address this problem?
Okay, great for this one. There's another question from Stefan, there is a huge amount of great open source software that is developed by developers working alone and coordinated asynchronously. Is there any criteria to say which kind of software products is benefiting most from mob programming?
So all of those open source projects would benefit from mob programming. That they can do it solo, which is okay and good, is a testament to a type of collaboration. Can we turn up the good on that collaboration? So I'm not saying that we don't work alone. I'm just saying we're working alone with probably the least capable or least beneficial way of collaboration possible. It's very difficult to understand a concept just by reading the code. And then we attempt, unless the code is extremely well written. So we have a bunch of documents to explain why we did what we did and how you can work with it and so on and so on. If we can make it easier to collaborate. I'm not saying that we can't work solo, but that we are not really working solo, because we have many others contributing to this. We're contributing with one of the least fulfilling ways of collaborating possible, through documents and code. I think those are good things, and they are ways to communicate. I just think we need other ways. And I think visual communication, where we're sitting together at a whiteboard, is extremely effective. And when we have to turn that into documents that we're sharing, then they have to be much more complete. And there's a lot of, we could go into this. There are many problems with that level of collaboration, where we do not directly work together. I believe working together just simply turns up the good on collaboration. Let's figure out a way to do that. A lot of open source stuff has been done with teams and pairs. They don't just work alone. Most of it probably has been solo programmers contributing. I certainly can see.
Awesome. One more question, and okay, no, there's one more. Yeah, just 3 questions left. So, how can we make visible flow issues in our software development process? Is it related to queues? I guess it's a little bit more like, yeah, how can we make the flow visible? And
so one way to do this is, one tool you can use is with a value stream map. And maybe we could do a session sometime on how we would do that. But if you can imagine this or visualize this, the simplest value stream map I could picture is where we draw a line, and when that line it's going to be horizontal, it's going across time. As we draw that line, if we find we are working effectively on something the customer cares about, then we are in the positive space. But if we go into a queue period or other wasteful process, we move into a non-value added space. So we're either value added or non-value added. If we draw that across the day for us individually or as a team, we'll find there are activities that are non-value added. So I'll give you a quick example. If a customer discovers a bug and they write down a bug report for it, they go to the site, write it down, that's a value added, because it's going to result in the ability to try to fix that bug, find out where it's at and fix it. But now they send an email off or put it into the system. Now it's just waiting till somebody picks up that report to act on it. And that is a non-value added period. As we pick it up, let's say the first person who picks it up is someone who's looking for stuff to bring into a meeting of a triage, they call it triage meeting, of people who review those bugs and then attempt to determine how should we address it. That waiting period, and then somebody picks it up, looks at it, that's value added. They're working on it. Then it's waiting. They say, okay, yeah, let's bring this into the triage. Now it's waiting till the triage meeting. It's not value added. So if we draw that time of all the things that are value added and not value added, we can determine when is flow happening, which is when it's value added, and when it's not happening, which when it's waiting in a queue. Another example of a non-value added is we're working on a document that somebody asked for that they will never actually use. And I've been in that many times, where somebody came to me and said, we need a document that shows what this process is like or how this database works or whatever. And you write the document, and then it just goes into the directory of files of documents somebody wrote that nobody ever used. I've proven this to myself several times, that those documents were never used, by putting a password on the document. So somebody would have had to contact me to be able to open it, and nobody ever contacted me to open the document that they asked me to write for them. So these are non-value added things, and there's many of them. And I believe prioritizing is one of them. I believe story estimates is one of them, and so on and so on. There's many non-value added things that we do in our work in the name of management or coordination or whatever process. We need to eliminate them all. Mob programming addresses some of them. I hope that was helpful.
Absolutely, yes. I'm actually trying to merge two questions now. So there is one question from Aaron, which is saying, like, some people, especially junior developers, are a little bit afraid of mob or pair programming. Do you have some strategies to take that fear away from them? And we have a similar question, but on the opposite side, from Miguel, which is saying, I have tried mob programming with recent graduate engineers, and it works very well. But it's hard to implement it with senior engineers. Any tips that could help with senior engineers? So the opposite
Yes, I like
side.
both of those. There's two sides of sort of the same thing. First of all, regardless of what your level is, working well with others is a great skill to have. When you become a team lead or a tech lead, your job becomes helping others get better quickly, more than it was before. The job of the team lead or the tech lead is to assist others in becoming more effective. So introducing new people, they might be a little bit afraid. That means it's the job of the rest of the team to find ways to make it easy for them to contribute and easy for them to share. And there are several techniques you can do for that, but one that we used to use was we would actively seek ideas from the more junior people. If they couldn't think about what to do, we could guide them on some choices. So we can learn how to break things down better and help them learn to think better. But a junior person who is not able to communicate, that's just one of the skills that they're going to be gaining over the next few years. And they'll be watching the other team members who are reasonably good at communicating and learning from them those techniques that they're using. Now, the other side is, how do you get more advanced people or the more senior people interested in doing this? I'm going to be very harsh on more advanced people. If you're not already focused on becoming good at working with others, that's the skill that you need to build. Because if you don't understand everybody else's points of view, you're limited to your own point of view. You sometimes will think, and I'm being very harsh right now, as a senior person, we will often think that our ideas are the right ones to use. But what I found is the more junior people will often come up with just as good of ideas. We're not about rushing towards an answer. Let's experiment with those more beginning ideas. Matter of fact, this is sort of, how are we going to retain the beginner's mind? We get it by having others around us who aren't as, their brains aren't as stuffed with knowledge. You know, we think we understand a lot, but this is an industry where things change frequently. And I've worked with junior developers who have interests other than my own in coding, and they are looking at things that I would never get a chance to look at. I want to hear from them. I'll add one more thing to it. We used a technique where we would allow, if two people came up with an idea to try at about the same time, we would try the more junior person's idea first, give them a chance to share their idea. And we often found we would get more learning out of doing that. Because, you know, the old saying, you know, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I think a lot of times we use the same old solutions when we should be willing to consider new ways to look at things. I want all those different point of views. And regardless, we're going to bring the more junior people up faster, and the more developed people, the ones who already are really good, they're going to be learning more and more how to help the others become good. When we level out the team and help everybody become better, that's a great benefit to our organization. Getting good at that is a good skill to have. I hope that answered that. We could probably spend a whole day on just this alone.
Well, it's morning for you, but it's evening for us.
Well, I don't mind. Just go ahead and kick back, and I'll just go on.
Awesome. There's a question from Nicoletta, which is, how often do you need to take breaks? Yeah, I feel, I guess it's very tiring considering the level of focus needed.
Oh, this is an interesting thing from two different points of view. I want to make it clear. If it is fatiguing, figure that out. Why are you allowing it to be fatiguing? Don't just assume that this, because it's an intense focus, that it needs to be fatiguing. You don't need an intense focus because you're actually sharing the brain with 5 other people or 6 other people or however many. You don't need to keep everything in your own brain. So when you're working alone, what do you usually do? Do you just work until you get so tired you fall asleep, or do you work so hard that you start sweating? What do you do when you're working alone? However you monitor yourself when you're working alone to keep it from being fatiguing, we want to do the same or equivalent concept when we're working as a team. So our rule that we followed was you can take a break anytime you want. You just stand up. You don't even have to say anything. Just walk out, go get a coffee, go take a walk. When you come back, you'll get caught up. If the team really needs you while you're gone, hopefully you took your phone with you and they can message you, hey, we got something we're stuck on. I think you can help. Can you come back right away? So take the breaks when you need them. Watch for it when it really is fatiguing. And we need to learn to be kind to each other. If we treat each other nicely, the day will go so much better. Matter of fact, when you come in the morning, dedicate yourself. How can I make this a wonderful day for my teammates? How can I make it wonderful for them? And if we all bring that attitude to work, then we will not have that, hopefully not have much of that fatigue.
Okay. Really short one, I guess. Well, any ideas on how to implement more programming spaces in open plan office?
Well, let's go ahead and talk about that for a moment. That's essentially what we ended up having to do when we were at Hunter originally. We started out going from meeting room to meeting room. Then we found a small room that was not occupied. We got permission to use it. We moved most of the stuff to one side, put a desk in there, and we worked alone with a door we could close, which wouldn't bother other people. But eventually they wanted that room for something else, and they moved us out into open cubicle area. And I think that probably was disturbing to other people. You have to learn how to keep a quiet voice, but it definitely can be done. You need to set aside a team area. You can't do it in just the cubicles. So you might need to combine. We combined, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we combined 8 cubicles, one into a larger area and one into a pairing area originally. The noise can become a problem. You need to pay attention to that. So another thing you can do is all work remotely. If you're all in the same space, in the same physical office, you can still be sitting at your cubicles with the headphones and a microphone and working remotely doing mob programming from cubicle to cubicle, all sharing a screen and a development environment that we do with remote mob programming. So there could be different ways to do it. I think we need to understand what's more valuable to us, having it easy for people to collaborate well and mob program, or is it more important that we keep the floor plan that the designers designed for us to have? I think from a management point of view, we need to make it easy for people to collaborate. And if a team needs their own separate room area, give them that room area, make it easy for people to come and go from that room area, make it easy for teams to collaborate. But this is something we need to invent for each organization. It will be different everywhere you go.
Okay. I think I have one coming, yeah, which is a little bit more personal, and which is about what happens in the team. I mean, at the very beginning, this is new, fresh, disruptive, and just opens a lot of possibilities. And this is the first wave. What happens after this? Like, what happens to the team dynamics, or if we need to add one more people, how can the new person actually contribute? I mean, now the unit is not individual; the unit is a team. But how does it change over time?
So I've been watching a lot of anthropology and history, prehistory. How did people evolve to what we are today? And one of the things they've discovered through findings is that people have collaborated since almost the beginning of maybe pre-humans. So collaboration is something that we're used to, and those groupings changed frequently. In other words, if you had a team, not everybody is going to be on that team at the end of the year. Somebody may have died. Somebody else may have become of age, and now they've joined the team. The teams were always changing. There was no set perfect team. So we need to understand that, yeah, people can come and people can go over time. I think it's useful to keep the team together, to allow the team to grow as a team. And if they are not yet good at introducing a new person to the team, that's a skill they need to work on. How do we get a new person on the team? Now, what we noticed for ourselves was it was almost automatic. When somebody joined the team, they got up to speed very quickly. So once a team, and let's say they're established, they've been working for a year or two, they need to add a new person. We found that to be very simple and straightforward. We had a lot of times when we would have visitors, they were just going to be there for a day. And we often found they almost instantly became effective on the team. So my suggestion would be, if you already have a team and you're having trouble adding a new person, there's some things we want to think about. Why are we having that problem? What can we do to make it easier for them? On the other hand, pay attention to when you add a new person or have a visitor, that why is it working? Is it working good? How is it working? So there's two sides to this. If we're having a problem, we probably need to think about it, but we should be observing what's good and what's working well. How do people get up to speed quickly? I've got a lot of stories I can tell about that, but there are people who won't work on a team or can't work on a team or won't be able to get the skills. But most humans can do this because it's sort of built into our genes, going back to pre-human times. I wasn't around in those days, so I don't have first-hand experience, but I believe those early hunters, foragers, and gatherers, if they didn't work as a team, they would have all died. And I think those skills are deeply ingrained in us as part of our DNA. There's plenty of material on the psychology of this. I think it's useful to understand that. I hope that was helpful. Again, I think I'm addressing the questions, but because of Wheel's laws, I'm probably missing the point almost every time. So.
Yeah, that was a good one. No, for me, it was exactly try to understand stability and dynamics for a team. So, and I think we covered them up. Maybe I'm missing something.
So I want to add one more thing to what I just said, and maybe we can call it a day if this is the end of the time. When I was young, I played in a band, 5 or 6 people, and I got pretty good at what I could do. And then one thing that I noticed, I was traveling around, I was about 21 years old, and I would show up in a community where they're going to have a music festival. I try to get there early so that I could be part of it, be more part of the community, and maybe get a little work where they could help pay me for being there, like maybe help building the stage or running some electrical wires or whatever. And almost always I would get in with some musicians there. And then at some point, usually, somebody would say, hey, this group is missing, the musician that they need for this gig at this festival. And they were wondering if you could, who we could suggest could fit in. So I could, volunteer and go on stage with the group and play music because I understood how to play in a band, because I'd done it quite a bit. I understood the songs that they did because I listened to the music a lot. I understood the nature of how this particular genre of music worked and so on. So I could join a group that I'd never played with before, and I could bring all my skills of teamwork to that group. Instead of me showboating and showing off, I would be standing back, waiting for them to give me the opportunity to play my part. I'd be watching them very carefully and hearing what they're saying and doing. Where can I add in at just the right moment? Now, I'm not saying I was great at that, and I wasn't a very good musician, but that's the same thing. If we're looking, how can we be the best team player we can be, regardless if we're new on the group or we're someone who's been there for a long time, the whole team is going to do better. Let's figure out how we can be the best team player that we can be.
That's awesome. And I think also that's a very good closing. How to be the best team player that we can be, especially in our profession. It's about being in the team, delivering as a team. Nobody can make the whole thing by themselves. And
yes,
pretty good. So I would say a huge thank you to Woody. We're gonna be seeing you soon in our remote training. Is there anything else that you would like to say, or Enrico would like to say?
Well, I certainly want to thank everybody for joining us here. I love sharing this, and I'm so excited to see so many people interested in mob programming lately.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank everybody in the audience. I'm leaving the microphone to Enrico.
Well, I certainly want to thank everybody for joining us here. sharing this. And I'm so excited to see so many people.
I think I don't see you talking. I can't hear your sound anymore, but I just wanted to say thanks, everyone. Apologies for, I don't know what happened, but at some point I couldn't hear neither Woody or Alberto anymore. Well, that's what happens these days. So not everything works perfectly all the time. Thanks, Alberto, for the questions. Thanks, Woody. I've been listening to your talk on my mobile, and we hope to see you again, whether in a remote scenario or in a workshop in Italy or anywhere in the world, really. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thanks for the questions. That's what makes our meetups a bit more entertaining and interesting. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to stay up to date with our news. I shared a couple of links on the chat, and I guess that is it. Thanks again, everyone. Much appreciate Woody taking your time for joining us from California. Alberto, thanks a lot. We are learners. Talk soon. Bye.
Thank you. Have a nice evening. Bye. Thank you very much, Woody. See you soon.